Mi nombre es Catalina, y yo existo. I am an immigrant, and I exist. I am undocumented, and I exist. We exist. But what if we were living in a time where it was justified by our laws and policies and media and dominant culture to incarcerate some people in a cage without access to sunlight or edible food, away from loved ones for months or years? What if we were living at a time where some people wouldn't be even called by their name, but by a number, or not even called as human, but as alien? What if we were living in a time where a corporation could make billions of dollars in profit from treating people as products? What if we were living at a time where, according to the US Constitution, slavery was still legal? What would you do if you were living in a time like that? And what would we do collectively as a generation living and witnessing such injustice and inhumanity? Would we be silent and comply? Or would we take action and take a stand?
A detainee at CCA Stewart Detention Center.
This call is subject to recording and monitoring. To accept charges, press 1. To refuse charges, press.
My name is Maxis Opal. I'm from Cameroon. I came to this country in May of 2003. After finishing my prison sentence in February of 2012, I was brought to Stewart Detention Center because ICE had placed a hold on me. This place is actually worse than being in prison. We are locked up 23 hours of the day.
Maxi is one of the 1,497 people that are locked up in the largest immigration detention center in the country, Stewart Detention Center, which is owned and operated by Correction Corporations of America, CCA, and it's located in the poorest county in Georgia, Lumpkin. And this is what we have now. Stewart Detention Center is part of about 250 detention centers in the country right now. And the United States has the largest immigration detention infrastructure in the world. And as we speak, the US government detains and deports more people than ever before. Just last year, the Obama administration deported close to 400,000 people. And in 2012, about 500,000 immigrants were detained. Just in 10 years, the number of people detained and deported has doubled. And it's about 7 times the number in 1994. As we can see in this graph, it was especially after 1996 that there was a huge spike. So I always look at these numbers and I'm like, how did we get to this point of this government detaining and deporting so many people? And I think it's important to understand that there's been a very intentional and concerted effort by the US government to criminalize migration and to make it easier for the government to lock us up and deport us. It just didn't happen out of nowhere. For example, in 1996, President Clinton and Congress enacted legislation that dramatically expanded the use of immigration detention. About 70% of people who are detained right now are there because of mandatory detention laws that basically stripped immigrants out of their due process rights, and they can incarcerate us without even any review of our individual circumstances. It also made it mandatory to be locked up while you're going through a deportation process. As if it wasn't hard enough already to have to fight a deportation case, you need to do it from inside a cage, away from your family, from your community, with little access to lawyers. And then this legislation also expanded, for example, the definition of what an aggravated felony is under immigration law. So, to make it in simpler terms, under the criminal injustice system, shoplifting, for example, is a misdemeanor. Well, under immigration law, it could be considered an aggravated felony, and that triggers detention and deportation. Or a drug conviction is seen as more seriously under immigration law. And then people end up with triple punishment: jail, immigration jail, and deportation. And then in 2004, ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, that is under the umbrella of the Department of Homeland Security, came out with their strategic plan called Operation Endgame. And their stated goal is to detain and deport all deportable individuals from the United States by 2012. That number is 400,000 a year. There's nothing random about that number. So then, we then also have to question and ask the question, who benefits and who profits from detaining so many people? About 50% of the almost 500,000 people who are in detention are in jails operated by local, state, and federal government. The other 50% are in jails operated by private prison corporations. You just sell it like you were selling cars or real estate or hamburgers, said Thomas Beasley, the founder of CCA. CCA, the GEO Group, and Management and Training Corporations are private prison corporations that are benefiting and profiting from incarcerated immigrants. And they make close to $5 billion in revenue every year. They also lobby heavily to pass anti-immigrant bills. And for example, together with the American Legislative Exchange Council, ALEC, an extreme right-wing organization comprised of powerful corporations and state legislators, they drafted together the blueprint legislation SB 1070. It's an anti-immigrant bill that makes it easier for police officers, for example, to ask for immigrants' papers. They basically make them immigration agents and then channel them into detention and deportation. These bills have been spread out throughout the country. And then most recently, Congress and the Obama administration approved the 2014 budget, where $2.8 billion of our tax dollars are gonna go into detaining and deporting 400,000 people this year. And not only that, but Congress has set up a quota. Just like a company sets a quota for how many sales they need to make every year, they've done that, but with us. And they're saying that every single day, there has to be 34,000 people locked up.
The bill is very small. It's a size look like a normal family bathroom. It's a size, I think it's smaller than that. Only Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 3 times showers per week. Only every detainee have 5 minutes shower. Even though you shower, but you don't give you handcuff.
Yu Wang was in solitary confinement for over 50 days before he was deported to China. Anyone who's not a citizen could be detained or deported. Legal permanent residents, undocumented immigrants, people with student or work visas. You could be here under political asylum or as a refugee. Just imagine the impact on our families and our communities if from one day to another, everyone who could fit in this auditorium just disappeared. We're talking about 1,100 people that are deported every single day, and 34,000 people that are locked up every single day under horrible conditions. Many counties pass agreements like 287G, where the police can act as an immigration agent. Then you don't have a driver license, you get taken to jail because you don't have a driver license. And then in jails, through another program called Secure Communities, it's easier to screen immigrants because of a shared database between the FBI and DHS. And then next thing you know, you're flagged for detention and deportation. This is how it's working right now. Or then we have, for example, people like Sheriff Arpaio in Arizona that conducts raids at workplaces constantly and will charge undocumented workers with a felony for working, and that triggers detention. Then some of them are taken to CCA's Eloy Detention Center, where they are given the option to work, but for $1 a day. And that's true for many other jails across the country. At Etowah Detention Center in Gadsden, Alabama, men are there for months or years without being able to go outside, to see the sun or breathe fresh air. At Adelanto Detention Center in California, people have been served rotten food, maggot-infested food, and people that are under suicide watch or with mental health issues are put in solitary confinement and stripped down. And just last year, within the same week, 2 people committed suicide inside Eloy Detention Center. And months later, 1 person committed suicide in York County Prison in Pennsylvania. Elsa Guadalupe González, García Mejía, Tiombe Carlos, presentes. But we know that detention makes part of a much larger system, a system that profits and benefits very few at the top. We know that detention makes part of a much larger system that forces people to migrate from our home countries in the first place because of free trade agreements, because of Monsanto seeds flooding our countries, because of militarization and occupation. We know that detention makes part of a larger system of criminalization and mass incarceration of Black and brown people in particular. And it's very much rooted in history. If we look at the 13th Amendment of the US Constitution right now, it says, neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for a crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. Under the supreme law of this country, slavery is still in place if you're convicted of a crime. And throughout history, those in power have used this to criminalize and incarcerate many, many people and then profit from their labor. Such was the case of the Black Codes, where the white power elite, fearful of losing their wealth generated by slavery, enacted legislation that criminalized the day-to-day activities of Black people, standing without a labor contract or walking without a labor contract. You would be arrested for vagrancy or loitering, and then through the convict leasing system, you could literally be leased out to a plantation or a mine or to build the railroads. This lasted for about 50 years. And what brought it to an end, in part, was thousands of people publicizing the brutality of the system and direct resistance. But then came, through another loophole, the chain gang. that started as a massive road development project, and where people once again could be leased out but to public entities. This also lasted about 50 years, and what ended it was in part the Black freedom movement. And this is what we have now. This is a graph of the massive expansion of incarceration in this country. And the blue line is the massive expansion of detention. We could say that today, the new facet of criminalization is the war on drugs that spiked, especially in the 80s. But what we have now is that the United States incarcerates most of its population than any other country in the world. And a larger percentage of its Black population than South Africa did during the height of apartheid. There is something intrinsically wrong and immoral with the current political, economic, and ideological system that we have to allow for this oppression to continue. It is clear to me that if detention makes part of this, there's not one drop of justice in detention. There's no humanity and no dignity in detention. And it's a system that needs to be abolished. But it's gonna take more than an innovative idea to do so. It's gonna take active resistance and active action from all of us as a generation. It's gonna require all of us to make part of it. So I invite you to join me by doing this. It's gonna take one, all of us publicizing the brutality of the system. Two, it's gonna take all of us listening and learning from those most oppressed and learning from their histories. Three, it's gonna mean that sometimes we're gonna have to disobey and not comply with unjust laws. Four, it's gonna mean that we're gonna have to take some collective risks to build the courage necessary to challenge and dismantle this system. And five, it's gonna mean that all of us are gonna be part of igniting a popular uprising that this country so desperately needs. Thank you.